Welcome to a very special Fans Fight Back with myself, Martin Theobald, and with an absolute A-star list and cast of those from the world of boxing. Starting from the top left of my screen, we've got Susannah Schofield, involved with pitch boxing, involved with Unified Promotions. Susannah, you all right?
I'm very well, thank you, Martin. Very well indeed. How are you?
I'm grand, thank you. And all the better for seeing all you guys tonight. And girls, sorry as well. And John Ryder, fresh off the back of his victory over Danny Jacobs down in London. John, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
No, it's a pleasure. Jamie Speight, a man who knows the highs and the lows of the world of boxing, all in between. How are you, Jamie?
I'm fine, mate. Thank you. Yourself?
Very well. And newly crowned WBO super welterweight world champion, Tasha Jonas. Congratulations, Tasha. Tasha, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on. Sounds good. That introduction sounded good.
Yeah, doesn't it just? Have you come off of cloud nine yet, or are you still there?
No, I was running on adrenaline for about 4 days, and it's wore off now, so I'm getting a little bit tired.
Is that now like the parent life comes back and you've got to get back to reality?
Yeah, if you hear loads of kids in the background, I've got my little nephew as well, so he keeps on like that. Shh. So.
Excellent. So yeah, again, congratulations, Tasha. Like incredible achievement. Yeah, amazing. So we want to come on the back of the weekend's boxing of the Josh Taylor versus Jack Catterall fight for the undisputed super lightweight, light welterweight titles, which I think if we all start by the premise that it was probably the wrong decision and the wrong winner, and feel free to disagree with me right now if you don't think that's the case. But we wanted to get the perspective of lots of people who have either been on the other side of decisions, involved in boxing in different ways, and kind of find out what it means to be on the end of a close call, be on the right side of a close call, find out if there are situations where you think you're never going to be on the right side of a call, and what it means, say, for Susannah, who's involved in the promotional side. And we heard Ben Shalom's comments at the weekend around how he perceived the judging to be from the fight. So I'm going to kind of open it up, and I think that maybe the best place to start is if I go to John and Tasha. If I start with you, John, kind of highest on my screen, you're someone, we were just discussing this quickly off camera, you're someone who has been on the right end of really tight decisions, and you've been on the wrong end of really tight decisions. And I'm thinking back to the Billy Joe Saunders fight. I'm thinking back to the Callum Smith fight when you didn't get the decision in both of those. And then you were on the right side of the Danny Jacobs fight. And you came out with a really interesting quote actually about the Jacobs one that made me think that upsets you perhaps even more than the Callum Smith and the Billy Joe fights.
Yeah, because I think with the Billy Joe fight, a very close fight. Obviously, Callum Smith, another fight that I thought I won clearly. You come out of them fights with a lot of credit, your head held high, and a lot of support from the public. But obviously, after my recent fight with Danny Jacobs, a fight that I've been on the close end of decisions before, and you know when you've won, you know when you lost. And as that fight ended, I felt like a winner. I knew that I'd done enough to win. And then in the coming days after, you're seeing the cries of robbery and whatnot. And I think that takes more away from you than the actual being robbed, because you can't, for me, that's a career best win against Danny Jacobs, a former 2-time middleweight champion of the world. And you really can't enjoy your glory. It's kind of taken away from you, and you can't bask in that moment and really lit up. So I think for myself, this moment passed me by in probably what is like, it is definitely a career best win so far.
And that's quite mad. You're almost saying that you can't get the enjoyment out of beating a fighter of the standard of Danny Jacobs because of the reaction of the public to it.
Well, yeah, I'd say, listen, 75% of the feedback is good and very nice and heartwarming, but you get that other 25% of people like robbery, hometown decision, a lot of stick towards Matchroom. And bearing in mind, I was actually, listen, the fight was in my hometown, granted, but I was the B side of the card. I was in the away corner. I walked the ring first, so he was the home fighter. So I'm taking a lot of stick for that. But listen, I watched the fight back today. I stand by believing I won. I won. I believe I've done a lot of clear work. I won 6 clear rounds, whereas I gave him 3 clear rounds and a lot of close rounds. So I believe I was a clear winner still.
And when you look back at, say, the Callum Smith and the Billy Joe Saunders fights, where you didn't get the result out of those, is there any bitterness that you have towards not getting the results? Those, like how many times have you watched those back and thought, no, wait a minute, I've probably got 6, 7 rounds out of that?
Well, I think the Billy Joe fight was kind of expected. I was not expected. Sorry, it's the wrong choice of words. I was on a Frank Warren card. It was a weird event. The fight ended up taking place at about 12:30 in the morning. So it was like 2 days after the weigh-in. So that was quite a weird one. But listen, that was a close fight, and it's one of them that you live by. I took a lot of experience, and it was always that. Well, if it was on the matchroom card, you probably would have got it. If it was on the away card, so you didn't. So listen, I took it as experience, and just dusted myself off to come again. But more so the Smith fight, I felt it was a lot more clear that I'd done enough to win. And listen, it's not Billy Joe or Callum's fault. It's down to the judges in the end.
And do you hold that kind of feeling against the judges that didn't give you the result? I mean, do you, off the top of your head, could you recount who those judges are and think, I'm not happy about that?
To be honest with you, I've forgotten who the judges were, to be honest. But I just feel the standard of refereeing in this country is very high, but the standard of judging is very under par. And I don't know whether it's a thing of we need to stop letting referees be judges as well and find alternatives, or whether the British Boxing Board need to start making plans for newly ex-fighters or ex-fighters to start becoming judges and giving their knowledge and giving back to the boxing and maybe becoming referees and judges to help the sport.
And Tasha, you're somebody who has been on the wrong end of 2 world title fights, like razor thin decisions, a fight with Katie Taylor, the fight with Terry Harper. How do you look, like, again, do you look back at that with a sense of injustice, or is it a matter of, you know, you kind of, can you look back at the fights and think they were close enough that you can understand it?
I think no matter what happens, it's not going to change. It's not going to change the result. So you have to take the positives. That's how I handled that. And obviously it led to bigger and better opportunity. The Terry Harper led to the Katie fight, really and truly. So it worked out for me in a sense, and it put my stock a little bit higher. I think after opener, I was, considered that bit too old, that bit too, past me best. And I think that fight raised my profile a lot more. So for someone like me, it worked out, but it's still, doesn't matter how many times people say, oh, you had that. I didn't, and I didn't get that, and I didn't have that chance. It's to, win it. Wouldn't be in front of a crowd anyway, because it was, on in Eddie's back garden. But
yeah,
you still don't get nothing tangible to just take and have and hold for everything that you've been through. And when you feel you've been hard done to, that's even like a harder pill to swallow, because you believe that you should have. It's like I've been back and forth with people all since Saturday about it, and it's like, it's like winning a silver in the Olympics, and then you're standing there, you're watching the gold anthem playing, and you're happy with your medal, and then you get home 2 months later, they said, oh, they was cheating, and you've now we've reinstated you with the gold, but you didn't get the ceremony, you didn't get the at the time with the crowd and the atmosphere, and you might have missed out on opportunities monetary wise because of that, and that's the dark side of it. You know what I mean? It's not just you being able to take the belt home. I feel for Jack, because he's, in this particular case, he's a lot of risks for no reward. And I'm hoping that people will want to fight him, and you know, his profile has raised. I've just been speaking to someone else who said it is his followers on social media have doubled since Saturday. It doesn't always work out for everybody.
And I remember quite vividly from your losses to Taylor and to Harper, like the integrity with which you handled yourself afterwards. And I think it's probably fair to say Jack Catterall did as well. I mean, he just kind of walked to the back, didn't make a scene about it, you know, kept himself to himself. How hard do you think that would have been for him? Because he must have felt that he won that fight. He must have kind of known that he's won that fight. Like, to keep his mouth shut and walk to the back, how hard would that be?
Sometimes it is the best thing to do, because you can react emotionally and say things and, you know, get criticised for it. And it's just because you're in that moment, in that feeling. And it's not a permanent feeling. It's just a temporary moment. So he probably did the best thing by just walking off, not saying nothing, not making a comment. And let's be fair to Josh, it's not his fault either.
Yeah.
You know, he doesn't make the decisions. He hasn't scored the rounds. He's just been given the decision. So, you know, I've seen that, you know, he's had death threats, and that's uncalled for, because it's not his fault. Yeah. But I do think, you know, I think that was the best possible course for him, is just not to say nothing. And I presume that he's gained a lot of people's respect for that, because he was so emotional, and he was even emotional going back to the hotel later on that night. And you no matter what anybody says, nobody's got the words, and it's never going to make you feel better. And yeah, I believe I beat Terry Harper, but mine was nothing like Jackson Josh's. So like I had him quite a wide winner. So yeah, I felt hard done by, but there's a difference. Sorry, someone keeps showing.
And I think you made a really important point during that, actually, about it's not necessarily even just walking home that night with the belt. It's actually about the income, the opportunities, all the things that come kind of down the road from it that he missed out on by not being given the victory that, you know, 99% of people kind of agree that he deserved, Jack Catterall. But if anything, hopefully you can take solace from looking at yourself and the fact that you went on to get punditry duties, you went on to win a world title yourself, you went on to achieve so much in such a short space of time already as well. So hopefully it's not you know, he can take some kind of happiness from looking at someone like you that's been able to get that.
It's going to take him a while, because it's going to hurt for a while, and it does. It you know, but hopefully, you know, his management, hopefully Top Rank, hopefully everyone who put that show on will ease his pain in some form of way.
Yeah, I think he probably has to accept he'll never get that undisputed shot that he had again, but the next best might be to start winning world titles, picking them up, and maybe unifying. And Jamie, I wanted to come from your perspective of someone who you fought up, you know, you fought Josh Warrington for an English title. You've been multiple-time area, multiple weight champion. But nowadays you kind of spend your time out on the road fighting prospects. You're in that away corner. Many people within the sport would say that in that role, you're very rarely, if ever, going to get a points victory against a young up-and-coming ticket-selling prospect.
Yeah.
How do you feel in terms of looking at that on Saturday night and knowing Jack Catterall was the away fighter? He was going up to Glasgow to take on the champion. What would he have had to have done to get a points victory that he didn't do on Saturday night?
As away fighters, they always say, you know, you've got to knock them out to get a draw. And you know full well that if you go in, I've had it loads of times where you've boxed the lad, and sometimes you're not even that asked. You go in there, you're just going to move about, but he's so bad, but sells so many tickets, and you beat him convincingly, and they give it like tight. They give it I don't know, 60-59 or 59-58. You think, you're having me on, yeah? But you just learn. It took me a while to get over. It took me a while to make the switch because I decided that I wasn't getting a fair shake of nothing. I was getting the big fights, but I was getting a lot shorter notice. Like, I think for Reece Bellotti, I got 3 weeks for Reece Bellotti. But I had just boxed for the area title and won the area title. So I had 3 weeks to sort, but still, it's not, I'm already fit, but you need to prepare and have a look at a few bits and pieces, technical side of things. And I decided I'm not getting a fair shake, so I'm going to have to just earn a few quid. So that's what I did. I went on the road and developed the ability to teach kids where they're going wrong, so they don't make the mistakes that I'd made. And I taught Houston at ringside. I talk them through the fight and say, don't do this, try that. Hit me with that again, I'm going to hit you with a left hook. Whatever works, But it took me a long time to be able to do that, and you've got to swallow a bit of pride.
Do you think there's something fundamentally wrong with the sport when...
Yeah.
How can I put it nicely? You're going to turn up and I know who's going to win that fight before you go into the ring. And I've sat there, as we were chatting about before, I've cornered you and I've heard you in the ring talking the other lad through the fight, telling them what shot they ought to be throwing rather than the shots they are throwing.
Yeah.
Do you think there's something wrong with the sport that can go on?
Yeah. It's the way it's always been, I think. But that doesn't mean it's right. Journeymen, they make their living doing what they do. A lot of them don't even try. They don't even try. They throw a jab, throw the odd right hand, tuck up, grab hold, learn how to kill time. That's what they do. Learn how to kill a bit of time, get through the round. I think that where judging and refereeing is involved, I think you have to have some form of background in boxing. You can't just go, oh, I'm a paramedic, or I'm going to be a boxing referee or a boxing judge. Because, like, when you see, we said earlier on, I think John touched on it, when you get abuse online, now 90% of these people don't have a clue about boxing. They don't know how to score it. They don't know what you have to do in order to win a round. They haven't got a clue. So they're just saying, I don't know whether it's their own feelings or they see a few other people say it on the internet, so they jump on the bandwagon. But 90% of them haven't got a clue. And I feel like that's a big problem in the sport. We're getting people coming into the game, wanting to earn a few extra quid. I'll be a ref, I'll be a judge, and giving out these decisions. And they will be swayed by the fact that it's the promoter's lad or he's a ticket seller. I think it's wrong. And it ruins kids' dreams. Look at Jack Catterall the weekend. That was disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. I felt real sorry for him, me.
And your fights 9 times out of 10 are judged by the referee as well,
which I think's wrong. I think that should change. I think the referee's got his own job to do, and the judges are the judges are there anyway. You know what I mean? 9 times out of 10, you've got a few rounds, so if they're there, they might as well do it, and it saves the referee a job, and it means it's more accurate scoring, which is the problem that we have in this country. I mean, you go back a few years, Mark, and it was don't go to Germany and fight. Don't go get robbed. Well, now it's don't go to the UK.
I know.
But given you've got no choice.
It'll build the reputation. And Susannah, I wanted to come on to it from your perspective now, because you've been involved in running your first show for Unified Promotions up in Sheffield. You've got your second show coming up. I won't give away the date, but in the not too distant future. What do you like? Sat watching that as somebody who's going to promote a show on Saturday night after the fight, had Ben Shalom sat there alongside Adam Smith saying, "This is wrong. This is
embarrassing." Didn't he?
Embarrassing was his word.
Yeah.
Like, what, as somebody who's relatively new to the sport in terms of, you know, putting on shows and such like, what did you think?
So, well, for me, I think there was a really, really clear winner. And it was interesting, actually, John, hearing you say that you can't remember the name of the referees, because I think poor Catterall will never forget the name Ian John Lewis. And I think it will stay with him and haunt him forever. And interestingly, I think it comes back to the, you know, Jamie, as you were saying, it's in football, in snooker, in all the other sports where you need referees, the process you go through is incredibly rigorous to get there. So it feels a bit like we don't necessarily have potentially the right training to get this through, because those sorts of mistakes can't happen. And I think, you know, I'm a licensed promoter with the British Boxing Board of Control. I think, you know, it's you want to believe in everything and all the paperwork and all the, you know, the codes of conduct. But the thing that really concerns me is they'll have an investigation, but they can't overturn the outcome. So worst case scenario, this referee will be suspended, but that doesn't help Catterall at all, does it? This is his career, what he gave up for it, what he's doing is that's just passed by, and it's kind of, oh well, you know, we'll have an investigation, we'll probably wrap someone over the knuckles. And I think that the Boxing Board of Control need more teeth. I think they absolutely should be able to overturn it. And I think from a promoter's perspective, looking at it, it comes down now that we are lucky enough, and one of the things that Unified Promotions is really embracing is working with technology. So, you know, we're all for the mouth guards that have the chips in, that read the impact of the hitting, especially through sparring, so you can safeguard. And, you know, because we represent women as well, and women dehydrate much faster, I think that sort of thing's really important. But the stats on the show were, which absolutely amazes me, and I just want to, I think thrown, Taylor was 255, Catterall was 357. Landed 85 versus 166, and the success rate of landing was 33% to Taylor, 46% to Catterall. Now, how he then came back with 3 points, it is just, I don't understand. Without a TKO or a KO, that just makes no sense to me. And I think questions have to be asked, and I think from a promoter's perspective, my job, especially for the women that we look after, because, you know, as Tasha will painfully agree, women don't get the paychecks that are coming up. You know, you have to be right at the top of your game. You look at your Fury and your White today, they're absolutely up there, you know, earning. But lots of boxers don't earn that. You have to be really, you know, so you rely on your sponsors. But it's getting harder and harder for me as a promoter to go out and get blue chip corporate companies to invest in a sport that they say we can't associate ourselves with this, because if it is corrupt, or if it is underhand, or if someone is, and I'm not accusing anybody of anything because you don't know, but when those bad judgments are made and it can't be overturned, then as you rightly say, Jamie, it's not how it should be, but we accept it. And I think at some point, every boxing fan's got to say, enough's enough. This is not the way this sport should go, because there are so many dedicated people that change their lives to make their career. And, you know, and I've been lucky enough, I'm in Portugal, and I've been lucky enough in Portugal to do some training with Dillian White. And I know how hard these guys work. You know, all of you on here have worked tirelessly to get to your career. So for someone to make a snap decision in 12 3-minute rounds that can't be overturned feels like we've got something somewhere fundamentally wrong.
And from that promoter's perspective, one of the things that, or one of the arguments, one of the cases that you'd often see put forward by people is that it's inherently wrong that you have judges that are paid by the promoter, put up by the promoter in hotels and such like, and then it's often only the home fighter, or the kind of the home promoter fighter, that gets the result in most cases. Does that, as a promoter, have any concern to yourself in terms of, or maybe not concern, maybe the absolute diametric opposite of concern? Maybe it's brilliant that, you know, you're the person that's going to fund getting in the judges, and should you ever have a title fight on one of your shows, you've got that almost home advantage, which is wrong. It's absolutely wrong, but it's there. And like, what can be done, do you think, as a promoter that gets rid of that?
I think you're right. I think there's got to be a look back on how this can change, and there's got to be some change moving forward, because it's, you know, there's got to be a solution that comes to this. So whether there can't be a title fight, or whether it's independently paid, or whether that every promoter puts a fund in, and then the Boxing Board of Control pays for the referees, and or they turn up on the night and you're not allowed to pre-met them, you don't know who they are. You know, there's got to be this moment. But I also think, you know, there's loads of football games that happen where the ref is there and everybody knows who the ref is going to be, but there's never a question as to that. There's certain things that are used. There's certain, you know, now we've got, I mean, VAR's ruined football for lots of people, but there's certain mechanisms that's been put in place to make sure. And I think most of boxing is so ethical, and I know everybody that gets into that ring actually wants it to be fair. And you know, as much as you look at Taylor, as you say, he's he's as mortified for Catterall as you know, and you could feel he was, even in the interview afterwards. He was, you know, if he'd said, I deserve to win that fight, it felt like he was kind of almost justifying it. And I think when you saw the reaction of Catterall in the ring, it was that absolute disbelief it had gone that way. And I don't think anybody in the sport wants to see those, you know, those kind of markings where actually it doesn't work and it's not right. So I think something needs to be done. I'm hoping this is the one that turns it, because we've seen bits before. And strangely, actually, you know, that there's an entire website written up for this referee that says stuff's happened before. And I just think there's a moment where maybe if you have one mark, then it's a moment that you have to go on a training course. And, you know, I'm not saying I want people to lose their jobs, but I do think if you've made some decision wrong and you have an investigation, then probably you need to go back and learn how to do your trade to make sure the same mistakes don't happen again. And I think just because you've been a referee doesn't mean, or a judge, doesn't mean you get to continue to do that if you make mistakes. But I definitely think we need to find some solutions, and whether there can't be, as you rightly say, Martin, there can't be a home game, as it were, or there can't be a home fight, or whether it has to be a neutral territory, or whether it's paid somehow somewhere else. I feel that there has to be something that there can't. What we need to get to is that the sport's not in question.
Yes.
And I love this sport. I'm passionate about it. You know, I always say I'm old enough to remember the last Tyson, and it wasn't Fury, it was Mike. And I remember growing up watching them fight, and it was brilliant. And I loved it. And I just think it's an incredible sport. But I want to be in a sport that nobody questions. And I want to be able to get sponsors for that sport that nobody questions. And I want to put on really good shows where people come not knowing who's going to win. And I think, and if all the promoters don't get together, including Ben Shalom, it's very easy to say it's embarrassing. Well, let's do something about it then. Let's change it. Let's make it less embarrassing. But we all have to work together to do that.
Tasha, do you remember the judges from your Terry Harper fight?
It was Mark Lyson, I think, for me. Is that the Scouse one as well? Yeah, it was him for me. So I don't remember the others two, but I remember Lyson was the one that was the swaying one. So that's the one you always remember, was the one that actually the one that's last read out, especially when it's going to be a draw like that. But just going back to what Susannah was saying then about, you know, the home advantage. Home advantage is like it is in boxing, should be like it is in football. You're at a ground or a stadium local to you. You've got the majority of fans cheering for you on your side, and maybe they influence the referee. You know, if everyone were foul in football, handball, then the referee looks at it, bar looks at it, whatever. But it shouldn't interfere with a judge's card. It doesn't interfere with home advantage, doesn't interfere with VAR. And that's the problem with boxing, is that home advantage is interfering with judges, and it shouldn't.
Do you find, I'll put it out to all three of you that have been in between the ropes, do you think there is that thing of being the home fighter, and when you're landing punches, they may not be landing, they may be hitting gloves, maybe hitting forearms, but your support, or the home fighter's support, is making the noise? Do you think that is genuinely influencing judging?
Yeah, 100%. And I touched on earlier, saying that 90% of these people watching the boxing in the venue, watching it at home, even some of the judges and referees, they haven't spent years and years in a boxing gym understanding how it is scored, stuff like that. And when they're concentrating and all they can hear, every time the home fighter presses on the front foot and he starts letting his hands go, all you hear is, "Wah!" And they must look and think, oh. And all the judges outside the ring, they look and think, oh. They don't think about what's happened just before. It's one of them. It's wrong, really, but it only happens in this sport. Like Tash just said, it's wrong. You don't see a cricket umpire going, oh, they're cheering out, well, they might win that. Oh, yeah, give it them. It's just mad, isn't it?
Have you found that, Tasha and John, in your careers, you know, the moments where you're pretty convinced that just purely because you may not have been the home fighter, it's been influenced, or you may have been the home fighter, it's been influenced by the sound of the crowd, impacting upon the judgment of those judges?
Yeah, I feel there is, yeah. I mean, obviously from both sides, you get a lot of cornermen that are really vocal, and the fighter might throw a shot, and they're obviously the cornermen are very close to the judges, so they're shouting out, "Lovely shot, like brilliant work," and I mean that can be influencing the judges. And I mean, I had it myself the other week. Jacob threw 2 jabs, I slipped, not one caught, but his coaches shouting out, lovely work, great shots. And it's like, well, he didn't land, they're not great shots, but it can obviously influence the people around.
I mean, Tasha, you've got
mine was definitely beautiful, Terry, beautiful.
Oh, I was just about to say that. I was just about to say, my old manager, Theobald, he is the worst for it. Beautiful,
Beautiful, Terry,
Yeah.
beautiful.
Every time.
But I mean, Joe's not a shrinking violet, is he, Tasha?
Oh yeah, he got pulled off in the corner against Taylor, but that was probably because, you know, usually you can't really hear what people are shouting because of the crowd, but obviously when it was in lockdown and there was no crowd, you can actually listen and hear what the coaches are saying, which normally if you're sitting at home doing, when there's a crowd, you can't. But yeah, I do think it does influence you. It shouldn't, but it does.
And do you find that it changes if you're the home fighter? Does it change how you fight when you've got that home noise behind you? And ultimately your aim is to stop your opponent or beat your opponent over, 10, 12 rounds, whatever it may be. If you've got that noise of the crowd behind you, are you consciously thinking that the more you perhaps step on, the more noise you're going to get from the crowd, the more likely that is to influence the judges at ringside?
Yeah, it can be a factor. So depending on the magnitude of the fight for me, like the crowd noise goes from level 100 to 0. And once I'm homed in, I don't hear the crowd. But on occasions where you do, and everyone's roaring and standing up, like, you're like, okay, if I go now, they'll feel pressured into doing it. I remember there was times, I think Taylor was hitting a lot at my gloves a lot, but because they're all cheering and shouting, like it sounds like it's getting through, like you were saying before, and it wasn't.
John, I think back to your Callum Smith fight, which was incredibly close. Could have gone either way, but a lot of people, the online boxing community, who aren't qualified judges, as Jamie says, but a lot of people had you winning that fight, by a round, maybe 2 rounds. When you wake up the next day from that, what are you thinking? Like, what would Jack Catterall have been thinking on Sunday morning?
It's not that, it's like the score. Listen, if a fight's close, a fight's close. But when one judge has got it something like a 118, 110, you just think, what the fuck are you watching? And I mean, why are judges seeing it so different to everyone else? Are they sitting in the wrong position? Are they at the wrong angle? Should they be sat further back? Should they be sat backstage watching monitors and not being in earshot of fans and whatnot? I mean, something needs to change, and they're obviously not doing it the right way now, are they?
No, I agree.
So is there a frustration when you wake up that next day? Like, I just think in any other walk of life, if you feel like you've been done wrong by essentially an admin error, you'd probably wake up and start Googling, like, how do I appeal against my traffic fine, my parking fine, whatever it may be. Do you have that same thought process as a boxer, waking up thinking, nah, that's not right? Like, what can I do about this?
I just think that,
you're not getting them nights. Sorry, mate. You're not getting them nights back ever again, are you? It's, the moment's gone. The moment's passed.
What were you going to say, Jamie?
I feel like the difference is, like, you can park a ticket, whatever, whatever the thing is. But boxing, when that happens, whether it's 2 men or 2 women, they're putting their lives on the line. You have put your life on hold for 12 weeks. You've give everything, blood, sweat, tears. You've give up the best foods that you love to eat. You've give up certain bed. You go to bed at certain time. You've literally put your life on hold for it just to be snatched away from somebody. So, I think saying this, like, oh, how do I deal with that parking ticket? It's different. How Jack Catterall must have felt, I don't know. I could have cried tears from the poor kid. It was horrendous. I personally, I looked at it, and like I say, I know the game inside out. I've been doing it 26 years, I've been boxing, and I only gave Josh Taylor 3 rounds and a share of a round. That's all I gave him. I just think Catterall, he controlled the pace of the fight, not just when he's on the front foot, but when he's on the back foot. You can be on the back foot and control the pace of the fight. Do you know what I mean? And I think a lot of people don't understand that because they've not been in the ring. But yeah, shocking, terrible that.
So what could be done about
Just
it?
to add to that, sorry.
No.
Just to add to that, people were saying, oh, you know, it was a little bit scrappy. Some rounds have gone either way. Catterall was hitting him and holding him. That was more than likely part of their strategy, because why are you going to let Josh unload with 7, 8, 9, 10 punches up close? So the idea was to hit him and get close and hold and stop that happening. So I thought that was genius, because he didn't get it off and he was doing a shoulder. So like people saying, oh yeah, well it's close. And no, that was probably a tactic. So he's implied, or yeah, he's imposed on Josh his will, which is how you score a fight. Who's got the will, who's got the, you know, control of the fight, who's, you know, landing shots. And they're all of the things of how you score a fight. So if you're looking at all of them broken down, then he's won.
See, I think when I watched the fight, and I've watched things back as well, now it looked to me like Josh was overloading his shots, and every time he threw that jab, he felt his weight over his front foot. So after he's thrown the jab, he was leaning in, and the right hand was missing then, so he was already over his front foot, falling into Jack. So Jack had no choice but to hold and try and make it work. And they probably developed that strategy as the rounds moved on, because Taylor was just falling over the front foot all the time. It was almost like, I don't know, it was almost like he was loading things up. I think Taylor got so angry, and Jack Catterall must have got under his skin, and he come out trying to bowl him out early doors, and he was putting everything into them shots, over eager, falling over the front foot, and fell into the trap. But he certainly had nowhere. He didn't win that fight, not in a month of Sundays.
And I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's an age-old phrase, but actually you don't play boxing. So when there's a red card or there's a yellow card in football and it's part of the team, or there's a bad decision, you know, you go off and you might feel a little bit down. But Catterall got out of that ring hurt, and you get into a ring, and even if you win, you get out being hurt, because you don't play boxing. It's the only sport where, you know, no matter how good you are, you're going to probably take a punch and get out being injured. So I think when you know you've taken that, you've put your body through it, and you've succeeded, it's even more unforgivable to get this wrong, because it's such a serious sport, and with that needs really rigorous codes of conduct and regulation, and it just has to have. There can't be mistakes made.
And that's why I said about having judges and referees who have been in that ring. They've been there, and they've put themselves through this. They've experienced what it is to lose, to be robbed, to be knocked out, to be hurt, your body to be aching all over, to not see your family for loads of time, because then they understand what they are doing to the other person, and they will give a fair, precise result instead of, I don't know what half of them are watching, but it's madness.
Right. Can I turn that around, Jamie?
Yeah.
Ian John Lewis was a professional boxer.
Yeah, well, did he doing it? I know what, I like Ian as well. I get on with Ian, but that was shocking. Was he sat behind the corner post? I didn't take any notice.
I don't know what his position was, which side he had, but yeah, I mean, you know, one of the themes that's come through is talking about making sure it's the right people in there who have got the right experience. You know, Ian's done all of it, hasn't he? Ian's been around the game long enough. Ian's, you know, refereed and judged hundreds of fights. He's fought himself. And so that makes you question then, what is the right person to do it? If that isn't, you know, if Ian's not doing the right job that night, or is it, do we just accept it as an off night?
I just find, like, say, for example, in like football, we said earlier, refereeing, there is somebody who teaches you how to be a ref. So you go, you learn. We don't have that in boxing. We don't have somebody who does the job perfectly, correctly, understands how you fight, how you win. You don't get to go to a school and learn. So everybody's got their different ideas, and that's the thing. Boxing's subjective. Some people like power shots, some people like pressure, but if you're putting pressure on and not landing nothing, you're not winning the fight, are you? The aim of the game is to land shots, score points. So it's subjective, and scoring's hard, but I believe there should be some form of school or course that you have to, not just the course, ref course, but like a school you have to go through with somebody who's like the head man. He says, this is how we do it, this is what we look for, and it just doesn't seem to work at the moment.
I would like to take it a step further back than that and have a rule book that says this is what we score a fight on.
Absolutely. Absolutely, 100%. And I think any promoter would encourage, or every promoter should encourage that. I think it should be really rigorous, really clear, so people know what they're training for. You know, the rules of every other sport are quite clearly out there. They're laid down. If you cross the line on tennis, if you serve out, if you do, you know, there's so much clarity in everything that I think that clarity has to be defined in boxing, because as I say, you don't play it. It's too serious and it's too good a sport to let go into kind of a, oh well, let's just move on. It was a bad decision, but you know, better luck next time. It doesn't work like that, and it shouldn't work like that.
Tasha, you were an Olympic level amateur boxer. Do you miss the days when it was like the button pressing to score a point? Like, because at least you knew what the score was. Literally, you knew what the score was at that point.
Yeah, live scoring is probably a good option, but to be fair, like it was no better then either. To be fair, if I'm totally honest, and we've seen that in the investigations that's come out about 216, where there's big prizes, there's always, and it's subjective, where you can, as long as you can explain why you think you're right, like you can always be right, and you can always worm your way out of it, and that's part of the problem. Like Susannah was just saying, it's not clear enough. They do go through processes. There is training that they have to do. You get an apprenticeship, and part of the problem, well, I believe that part of the problem is that the process to become an elite level where you can judge a world title fight is so long that there's only 8 referees that are at that level in the UK. So I think you get, you can correct me on this, Susannah, if you know, but I think you get given maybe 6, and then it's agreed between the fighters who the 3 are going to be, or it's agreed between someone, the board, whoever it is, who the 3 are going to be. But you've only got the choice of 8 anyway in the first place. So that's why we're seeing the same people for the same fights, and we're having the same problems, because there's going to be no new crop, because it takes so long to get there. I think the whole process takes about 12 years to even get to that level. So, like, are referees even staying in the game that long to become, you know, does the process need to be shorter? Does it need new eyes, I don't know what the quick fix is, because like I say, wherever there is big money and big prizes to be made, there's always going to be cheating.
And also, I mean, to follow up on that point, Tasha, that A-star referee kind of club, which has to be, I think you have to kind of be voted into it by the other A-star referees. Just because you're an A-star referee, should that make you a judge? Like, aren't the two things entirely separate?
Yeah, and I think they should be. I think they should be. You know, there's everyone has their skill sets, don't they? And I'm not saying people can't do both, but I think there should be people that can become judges without having to have gone through that, you know, that process. And I think it's time, possibly, you know, in my humble opinion, to take a step back from everything that has been and look at what it should be now. And I think as boxing starts to rise again, you know, it's becoming more and more popular as a sport. I think it's so important that these issues are addressed now, before the rise is just people just get disappointed and turn off, because they already know before the fight who's going to take it. And I think it's you know, it's such a good sport, and there's so many passionate people in there, and people, as I say, they dedicate their lives to be able to train for this stuff, and you know, and eat properly and work out. And it's a very selfish sport, isn't it, when you're a boxer? I mean, you know, the training and the rigor and the process and the way you have to live your life, and it's incredibly demanding. So yeah, I think it's time to kind of, without standing, you know, rip up the rule book and start again. I think it's definitely time to have a look and make sure that that you know, that these sorts of things just don't happen.
I want to ask each of you for 2 changes you would make specifically around the judging, refereeing side of the sport, and then I want to see what else comes out of it. Jamie, I'm going to start with you, because you probably had the most fights, I suspect, as a pro out of everybody on here. Can
you tell? Look at the nose.
Well, I didn't want to say, Jamie.
Don't have to, mate. I've got a mirror.
What are the 2 things you would do to change, you know, what would be the things that would stop Saturday night from happening more regular? If we accept there's always going to be close fights, and to that end, not everything's a robbery. Sometimes it can just be a close fight. What can stop the really bad decisions? 2 changes.
I think there needs to be like a football referee has like a rule book, and he sticks to that rule book, and that's the way that the game is played. In boxing, we don't have that. Like we just discussed, it's subjective, where some judges might like pressure, some might like who lands the most shots, and that needs to be scrapped. And they need to say, right, this is how it is. We score for this, this, and this, and that's it. Not, oh, I like pressure, because that ain't how it works. We're scoring for where shots landed, for example. I don't know, and like the old button thing, that needs to be sorted so that everybody's on the same page, scoring the same things for every single fight, and then everybody will see where we're at. That's the one thing. I don't want to. I just want that sorted.
I like it. Tasha, what would you go with? What would be your two things if you could change?
I suppose our own kind of version of VAR, where we'd have two independent judges sitting nowhere near the ring, nowhere in possibly the arena, scoring it from a different area, and then maybe live scoring.
So would those two be additional to the three, or
additional to the three? Yeah, and then take work it out for somewhere, but someone like you're saying who's not impacted by the crowd, the noise and whatever, they're sitting away somewhere like VAR does, and all they're seeing is what they see, and they're independently scoring it. I
like it. John, what would you go with?
Well, I'd keep referees and judges separate. If you're a referee, you're a ref. If you're a judge, you're a judge. I don't do both. And I think, yeah, I agree. Maybe like a fourth official kind of thing. Someone to score independently, and I mean, not so to affect the fight, but maybe to represent the board and saying, well, this is how I had it. This is my score. Why is it so different to the three judges who are scoring it themselves?
Yeah. What would you do, Susannah? What would be your two amendments?
I think my first amendment would be accountability. I think that if you get this wrong and you go back and the Boxing Board of Control look at it and it's this wrong, then that individual who scored has to be accountable. And I think it has to be worse than potentially a suspension, because it just feels like there's no teeth in this. Like Catterall's career has changed, his path has changed, his demeanour has changed, millions of boxing fans' views have changed. So I think there has to be someone that's accountable for that. And as you said, there'll always be tight fights, and that's what makes boxing brilliant. But when it's so clear, I think there has to be some form. And I think Tasha's point of an independent judge, someone sitting somewhere like VAR that does, and I also think as well, listen, we live in an age of data now. We know how many fights, we know how many hits have been done, we know how many have impacted, we can read all of this, we know who's doing. So maybe that should be taken into consideration when it's so close, because if you've landed 66% versus 33%, maybe you just need that sway over that's the way it should go. And then because if it's, if the punches are too hard, then it becomes a TKO or a KO. So I think there's lots of things that can be done, but I think for me, if I could change one thing now, it would be that opportunity to have a look at what needs to be changed. And I think I don't want to see this brushed under the carpet again. I don't want to see everybody forgotten, with the press of Fury and White today, and White not turning up to the press conference, and then the next big AJ Usyk, and it will all just get under and we'll move on. And that's good, because boxing's great and these fights are going to be phenomenal. But actually, I think for Catterall that there needs to be some form of change here, because too many people's careers have been taken off the path where they should have gone, and I'd hate to see this lose momentum and be brushed under the carpet.
So there are two things I pick up out of that. One, the accountability aspect. Would you encourage accountability on the night? So, for instance, Sky to interview the judges straight after the fight?
I think, why not? I mean, I don't think there should be anything to be, to be veered away from. If you're, you don't want people to be victimised, and we have a lot of what we call sofa fans, aren't they? Where we've all got an opinion and we all say, oh, he shouldn't have won or whatever, or she shouldn't have won. But actually, you don't really, it's often different. And I think what's interesting, and even from the Pitch Boxing app, what's interesting is when people do the live score and then they go and watch it back and see the replay. Actually, people go, oh, do you know what? That didn't connect as much as I thought it was in there, or sometimes it's different in the audience. But I do think, I wouldn't ever want anybody to feel that they need to score in a certain way because of being accountable, but you just want it to be fair, don't you? So I think, what we shouldn't necessarily hide away. If somebody has made a decision, then yes, then justify what that decision is, because it's too important just to be able to say, oh, well, that's the way it looked for me and that's it, and thanks ever so much, I'll ride off into the sunset and it doesn't really affect me.
I want to come back, John and Tasha, you were talking about the potential of having a judge away from ringside and kind of tucked away in a room somewhere, perhaps. what I struggle with that one is that there's, you know, the amount of times I've sat ringside and you see so much more being actually sat ringside than you do when you've got it on the TV at home, on Sky, on BT, on DAZN, on whatever it may be. You don't have that glimpse of, like, you only ever see it from kind of the waist upwards of the boxers. Do you think you'd risk losing something, or do you think with the amount of technology available, they ought to just find a better way of getting the camera angle and then moving somebody to a room elsewhere?
Yeah, I didn't think of the technical way to be able to do it, but yeah, I get what you say. And to be fair to the referees, even though Ian John Lewis was sitting directly by us, so that was me, Adam, Matt, Ron, Spencer Oliver, Carl Frampton, me, Johnny, Anna. So he was sitting the same side as us, and we all seen it quite a wide score. That, I'm not saying anything, but like that's the side of the ring he was sitting on. But when I've sat aside of the ring and filmed, this is in my amateur days, and filmed a fight from another angle on the ring, and it did look like two different fights. So I get what you're saying. So it sometimes looking from a different angle is hard, but like, we can't all be wrong, is what I'm saying. 99% of people can't all be wrong. So there just has to be another way. And accountability is, like Susannah said, is so important, because, you know, there is just going to be I presume there'll just be a message in the press release sometime this week saying, you know, I've spoken to them, they've justified their scoring, and that's the end of it. And then it's yesterday's news then. And it becomes about Usyk, it becomes about, you know, the next Josh fight, it becomes about something else, and that is lost. But no one sits there and explains to Jack. No one, like, Jack has got no one to be able to look him in the eye and tell me how you scored that like that. And that is a big problem.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was going back to earlier with the thing with John, saying when you wake up the day after that terrible decision has gone against you, or a decision you feel unjust about, you don't have any recourse to go back to the people and say, I don't think that's right. Like, there's nothing available to you as a boxer to do that, is there? And it must be the hardest thing in the world.
This is what turns people away from the sport, Mark, to be honest. Like you say, we give so much. I mean, from everyone, I can't speak for everybody, but you think the ones that do put it in, and the ones that are up there, top level, British level and above, you know what I mean? They give so much to be where they are and be who they are. It's just horrendous. It shouldn't be happening. It's so bad. Yeah. And the other thing I was going to touch on is, we're in a sport where it's violent. It's a violent sport. We punch lumps out of each other. Now, a face tells a story. Now, I've never seen anybody box 12 rounds and say, I just threw body shots the whole fight. Look, it doesn't happen. So look at the two faces. Jack Catterall, barely a mark on him. Josh Taylor, his eyes were swollen, scuffs, cuts. He was smashed to pieces. Now, that tells enough of a story, and that's without the body work. Come on. It's a bit far-fetched, isn't it?
Look, I won't take up any more of your time because it's getting late, and I appreciate you're all boxers and you've probably got training to come in the morning. So look, I can't thank you all enough. And just to get that perspective from a fighter and what you think could potentially change in the future, what you'd like to see change, what I don't want to see happen this week, and I can probably say it that you lot can't, is to see Robert Smith put out a message saying, as you kind of alluded to earlier, Tasha, we've investigated, we've had a conversation, now we all move on and go on to the next big fight. That, I think, as a fan, would be quite heartbreaking on behalf of Jack Catterall to see it. And so, you know, I know you've all been through your own heartbreaks. John, you know, with Callum, with Billy, Tasha, with Terry, with Katie, Jamie, numerous fights I've been there for that's, you know, you've won, but you've lost. Yeah, and Susannah, you know, you're going to see it all through the years when you promote shows, and you know, it's to try and clean this sport up and make it as fair for everyone who trains, sacrifices, and fights as possible.
I'm going to do my best, Martin. I'm going to do my best.
Yeah.
You know what the bad thing is, though, Mark? Right, I seen a thing on I think it was on Twitter actually, of Sky. They interviewed Robert Smith, And he's already, I think it must have been straight after, or maybe the day after the fight, he's already pretty much justifying it, saying, oh, it's a really close fight. I didn't think there was no problem with the scoring. And I watched it and I thought, I can already see what's happening. It's just going to go there. Robert's going to think, oh, you know what? I can't bother with this. It's too much hassle. We flick his quiff and it will get brushed under the carpet.
I'll stop you there, Jamie, before you lose your license.
I didn't get one. Did I? I didn't get one since COVID, but when I get one back, we'll see how we get on.
Yeah, before you get called before the Southern area. Thank you so much, Susannah. Thank you so much, John, Tasha, Jamie. You've all been great, and it's really great to get your perspectives.